Good afternoon. Welcome to a special afternoon episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm Jazz Monet. And as always, let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if you can see me. Much appreciated. Hey, Martin, what's up? Thanks to you, Martin, and to anybody else who shows up during this stream. I'm still working on times. It's so funny because at the beginning of this is season 3 for us. I was like, yeah, we're gonna stick to a schedule, and yeah, life just had other plans, so here we are. So we'll see how Friday afternoons do. I was advised against it, but I mean, hey, this is time I had available. There's a few things happening in the sports world this week that I wanted to talk about. So here I am to talk about them. So I definitely appreciate anybody who shows up, especially on short notice, especially with me not having a set schedule yet. Life is life. And if y'all support me to the point of doing this like full time or at least enough to like quit a side hustle, we might get a regular schedule. But in the meantime, I'll be here when I can be here, and I appreciate y'all for being here when y'all can be here. So I'm not gonna hold y'all. We've got hey Vachi, shout out to Vachi Barty in the chat. Um, Speaking of the chat, if you're watching on Twitter, I saw a few people tuned in on Twitter. If you want to participate in the chat, come over to YouTube. The link is on my page. I shared it whenever I shared the picture of the time that I was going to be going live. So if you're leaving comments on Twitter, there's a good chance that I won't see them. So if you want to participate, please come over to YouTube and meet us there. But yeah, I'm not going to hold you guys. Long story short, earlier this week it was clear that I wasn't going to be able to go live when I thought I was. And so I kind of scrapped it for this week. But then a lot of stuff started happening this week. So here we are to talk about them. So I'm going to start off with a few shout outs and call outs, get into a couple of interesting stories from the sports world this week. And then we'll get into the Colorado game that's coming up. It's been marked on a lot of people's calendars, the Colorado versus USC game. And then some Cowboys news as well as just a few thoughts that I have on the Cowboys versus Patriots game that's coming up. Hey, Bieber, what's up? All right, so the shout outs and call outs, a couple of them are really quick and easy. Shout out to ChefHoppie. We talk about ChefHoppie a lot on the show. I did an interview with ChefHoppie this summer where he talked about the business that he was starting with Dak Prescott. And since that interview, he has created an Instagram account for that business and has started talking about it on his social media. It's called Hopscotch. It's a food truck that's going to be in the Arlington area, possibly providing some game day experiences and whatnot. So apparently they did a soft launch recently, or I think it's a soft launch. I'm not really sure. I saw some posts about it where they were actually using the truck. It was set up in a couple of places. They partnered with the bar, and it looks like things are going well. Honestly, it's like the flyest food truck I've ever seen. So I can't wait to try it. And it looks like things are going well on that end. So shout out to Chef Hoppy, who is doing great things and is a support of the show, friend of the show. Thank you. Next shout out goes to Okoye Media. So he and I are going to actually be doing a bonus episode this Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. Anybody who follows us on Twitter, you might have seen that we had a little back and forth about the post Shannon Sharp made where Brittany Renner revealed her body count, a whopping 35 dudes. And I just thought, so if you watch the clip, Shannon Sharp has like this reaction where he just like starts throwing back shots and drinking. Like this is just the most appalling news he ever heard. And I'm just thinking in my mind, so like real shit, y'all. Brittany Renner is 31. So let's say she had sex for the first time when she was 18. A lot of people start sooner than that. That's fine. But let's say first time she had sex, she was 18. So 18 to 31, that's a total of 14 years if you count the 18th year. And so if you divide 35 guys among 14 years, you're looking at 2.81 or something like that. So that's like 2 to 3 people per year. So for a woman who looks like she looks with as much access as she has, I'm like, okay, so that means a new sexual partner every 4 to 6 months. I feel like that's not that unreasonable or that weird or that high of a number. And people are just like freaking out, like, oh my God, 35. Now, I did have one guy on Twitter who kind of admitted that to a lot of men it might seem like a high number because they can't imagine themselves having 35 partners by the age of 31. And so they're just looking at it like, oh my God, how does that even happen? And I'm just like, well, first of all, if we're being real, especially if you look like Brittany Renner. Now, say what you want about her character. I don't know that much about her as a person, but from what I've seen of her, I don't think we would be like besties or anything. Like, I don't have a problem with her, but I can see how she might not be everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. But I'm just saying, like, if you look at her, and if you're a woman who looks like her, and especially like thinking she just turned 31, so she's been mostly, if not exclusively, dealing with dudes in their 20s, it's not inconceivable to think that she can find a new dude to fuck every 4 to 6 months. Because dudes, especially when they're in their younger years, in their late 20s, dudes are easy, if we're being real. Not all of them, of course. Like, we have to put that obligatory hashtag, not all men. But a lot of dudes are easy. So, yeah, I wasn't that shocked by it. And I kind of had some things to say about the people who use body count to, I guess, judge other people's character, or like evaluate their worth or as a person, or their goodness as a person. And if you've watched this show before, or if you've seen me as a guest on other shows, you already know I'm a sex positive person. So yeah, I had some things to say, and there's some real assholes in this world who just have a real problem with you not having a problem with a woman who slept with 35 men. It's kind of weird. But Okoye doesn't agree with me, but he was respectful in his rebuttal. So we went back and forth, but it wasn't rude. It's not like an antagonistic thing where all of a sudden we're beefing now. It's nothing like that. But he did throw out the idea of wanting to do a podcast episode on it, and I was like, sure, because he seems like someone who's respectful enough to have the conversation. I think he is too. I respect him. So it should be a good time on Tuesday if you want to hear a couple of content creators talk about some non-football, non-Cowboys stuff. Yeah, be there Tuesday. I'm pretty sure it'll be here. Martin threw in, especially with her status. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, she's got access to a lot of people. So I'm just kind of like, not that weird, y'all. Not that weird. All right, so let's see. Next shout out goes to the Dallas Wings. So they have game 3 tonight against the Las Vegas Aces. It's going to be tonight at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Um, and sorry, I still have a bad habit of trying to like read comments and talk to y'all at the same time. I'm gonna get better at that. But yeah, so Dallas Wings tonight, 8:30 Central Standard Time. It's game 3, which if you know anything about the WNBA playoffs, this is a best of 5 series, which means if they lose tonight, they're out. Now, when this series first started, I was like, I don't think it'll be a sweep, or I said I there's a possibility that it won't be, because the Dallas Wings have put up a fight against the Las Vegas Aces throughout the regular season. But even with them putting up a fight, they actually only won 1 game out of the 4 they played against the Aces during the regular season. And it looks like the Aces are trying to make quick work of this and and get it out the way. So yeah, game 3 could be the last game of the season for the Wings. A lot of people are predicting that the Aces are going to close it out and get ready for the finals. So we'll see what happens. But like I said before, it's a good contest. The Dallas Wings play an intense, a high intensity, fast pace offense, and the Aces like to attack from the outside. So regardless of what your preference is in terms of basketball, it's a fun series to watch. All right, now let's look at what's distracting me in the comments real quick, and then I'll get back to this and I'll try to focus. Brian Bradford is informing us that Devin Harper was claimed off waivers, but to the Bengals. That's cool. I'm not really mad about that. Congratulations to him, as a matter of fact. I hope he does well with the Bengals, and that and he has a bright future and everything. Okay. Next shout out goes to Damian Lillard. And honestly, I don't know if this should be a shout out to him or a call out to the Blazers, because I keep hearing conflicting reports, but we'll just talk about what happened. So if you've been paying attention to the NBA world, Damian Lillard been with the Portland Trailblazers for a long time. A lot of potential for this guy, but has never been able to seem to get his team to a championship. And so there's been talk actually for years about why he should be traded and where he should go. After this year's NBA playoffs, a lot of people said he would be a great fit for the Heat. And a lot of people still believe that, but that's not where he ended up. Just a few days after he made some comments about, it sounded like he was criticizing the way a lot of teams try to put together a big three. So just days after that tweet came out, he ended up being traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, the reason why I said that it's possible that maybe this shouldn't be a shout out, maybe it should be a call out against the Blazers, is because since then there have been some stories that have come out that have said if the Heat trade didn't go through, that Damian Lillard actually wanted to go back to the Blazers and just stay there. That he didn't. That it was either the Heat or nothing for Damian Lillard. But he ended up going to the Bucks. I haven't found any confirmation that the Blazers like denied that request, or I don't know the details on that. As far as the sources I've read, it's just rumors. I'll put it that way. But as far as the trade itself, it ended up being a three-team deal that involved the Bucks. So the Blazers are going to receive Drew Holiday, DeAndre Ayton, and Tamani Kamara. And so if you recognize those names, then you know that the other team included was also the Phoenix Suns. So that's where the one of note, DeAndre Ayton, comes from, because a lot of people have been talking about how the Suns needed to get rid of DeAndre Ayton, that he wasn't a good fit for them. So the Suns got rid of Ayton, and they're receiving Yusuf Nurkic. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm trying, y'all. Grayson Allen, Nasir Little, and Keon Johnson as part of the trade package. So I'm happy for the Bucks. I'm happy for Damian Lillard. I hope things go well for him. In the sense that I hope he at least gets the championship that he wants. He might not be going to the team that he wanted to go to, but his career was getting a little bit stagnant in Portland. So the the actual concerning part for me was what the Suns ended up receiving and what they gave away. So once again, if you follow this show, you know I'm a fan of Devin Booker and the Suns. And at this point, it might just be Devin Booker because the way the Suns have been making moves since they got this new ownership, it's almost like they're just trying to set themselves up for a rebuilding year. Um, they don't have anybody. And as a matter of fact, I did pull up a clip from Dwayne Rankin talking about this. So Dwayne Rankin is the guy that I usually go to whenever I want to know like the ins and outs of what's going on with the Suns. So he had a few things to say about this. I'm gonna share the clip that he shared. Pardon the quality, because this is coming straight from his Twitter, so it's how he shared it. But I just want to share what he had to say about the trade.
Time moves really fast, right? I look at it, 2021, Phoenix Suns in the NBA Finals.
Okay, it looks like we're not going to be sharing that right now. Give me 1 second. This happens sometimes. I'm going to switch to my other Wi-Fi and then we'll try that again. But long story short, so for a long time, Devin Booker was kind of in the shadow of CP3, right? And a lot of people were like, okay, how is Devin Booker going to step up and prove himself if CP3 is always there, the leader in the locker room, the leader on the court? How exactly is this going to work? Because a lot of people who pay attention to Devin Booker saw him as like, the next face of the NBA, the next star. And so they wanted to see him step up, take control of the team, and him be the face and leader of the team. And so I always imagined one that CP3 would finally get a ring with the Suns, and I always imagined that it would be more of a baton handoff, like CP3 building the team, helping it become great, and then Devin Booker kind of taking over and being able to lead a good team. But the way that the Suns' new ownership has handled this, it's like they're not really. They don't seem to really be taking into consideration the way a lot of Devin Booker fans wanted this story to go for him. And so now he's ended up the face of a team that's in a lot of ways a shell of what it had the potential to be when it had the twins, when it had a lot of its bigger guys. So like JaVale McGee is one guy who left, and a couple of other people whose names are not coming to me because I'm trying to fix Wi-Fi and talk to you guys at the same time. But let's listen to what these guys have to say, and then we'll get back into that conversation.
Time moves really fast, right? I look at it, 2021, Phoenix Suns in the NBA Finals. Monty Williams, Coach of the Year. Monty's gone, CP3 gone. In fact, the only guy still on this roster from that time, Devin Booker.
I hate
What do you think
technology
about
sometimes, y'all.
well, when
Okay, I'm gonna give that a few more seconds to load or something. I don't know. I've switched Wi-Fi. I have no idea what's happening. I don't have that many tabs open. And yeah, this happens sometimes. Sometimes you test things out and then you go live and they're just like, yeah, the thing that we said we'd do for you, we're actually not gonna do for you. Let's see one more time. Okay, fuck it, whatever. I'm sure most of y'all are not here to hear hear about the Phoenix Suns anyway. But yeah, long story short, I kind of feel bad for Devin Booker in this situation because now he's going to be the face of a team that's not going well, and it just kind of makes me wonder what this is going to mean for the trajectory of his career, and his potential to kind of go down in history as one of the great leaders of the Phoenix Suns because now he's basically dealing with a team that's rebuilding a lot of pieces that don't necessarily fit together on paper, and aren't used to working with each other. So, some of the things that we saw him accomplishing, now look like they're going to be derailed by at least a couple of seasons if they ever happen. So here we are. So my last shout out is actually an interesting story that was, put on my radar by a friend of mine. No, actually, I have two more shout outs. One of them is to RyanClark, which is like practically an obligatory shout out at this point. And the other one is a story that was put on my radar by a friend of mine. So, for the sake of time, I'm going to make the RyanClark thing quick. And it's not even so much a shout out to him, it's more so a response to something that he posted on Twitter. And just like the nutrition professional in me was like, okay, you need to comment on this. And I feel like it also says something about how people interact on Twitter. Now, what's interesting is here's what happened. RyanClark put out a tweet that said something like, "Hey, who wants to start a diet?" So I see it and I respond like, "Hey, yeah, tell us more about this diet." Um, and he responds back like, "Oh, it's going to be some intermittent fasting, low carb, no sweets, yada yada yada." And so I was like, "Well, I'm in my bulking phase now, so I need my carbs, but intermittent fasting could work." Now, here's the funny part to me when you're talking to a person in person, like let's say I was at an event and I was talking to RyanClark directly, and he said to me, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting this diet." And I was like, "Tell me more about this diet." And then I had something to say about it. I could talk to him directly without interruption because like I actually did want to know like what he was trying to do. Because I think the comment I had after that was like, what are you trying to do? And I'm gonna tell you why I asked that in a second. But like immediately people started replying to my comment with all kinds of shit, and it just made me imagine like, can you imagine being in public talking to somebody and they're like, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting this diet." And you're like, "Yeah, tell me about it." And they're like, "Okay, intermittent fasting, no sweets, low carb." And you're like, "Okay, well, here's what I think about that." And somebody just jumps in between you and they're like, "Actually, that's a terrible idea. I intermittent fasted earlier this year." And you're just like, "Who the fuck are you? Get out of my conversation." And it's like, or somebody else jumping in between you and being like, "Hey, I actually have a better way for you to go about that. You can learn more if you DM me." Like it's just super freaking weird the way interactions happen on Twitter. So I never got an answer to my question. I got a bunch of replies and my notifications that I did not care about. And yeah. But anyway, the reason why I was actually trying to figure out more about what he was trying to do is because of this. And I'm sharing this with you all because it might be useful information for you. It might be useful information for RyanClark if he does happen to see this. But a lot of times when people say they want to do intermittent fasting and low carb, it's because they want to lose weight. And so the thing about that is it's like you can intermittent fast and still eat so much that you don't lose weight just because you like cutting the hours in which you eat is supposed to be like sort of like a strategy to help you eat less, but it doesn't guarantee that you'll eat less. It doesn't guarantee that you'll lose weight. Low carb also doesn't guarantee that you'll lose weight. The only way to ensure that you actually lose weight is to actually track your calories. And then on the flip side, and not to call you out, Ryan, but it's like I've been following you for years, and I know like every now and then you pop up with this like I'm going on a diet thing. And so one another thing for people to consider is that when you yo-yo diet, in other words, you go on a diet and hop off, and you go on a diet and hop off, and you do that over the course of years, it can actually hurt your metabolism and cause your body to create new fat cells to make it harder for you to lose weight in the future. So a lot of people don't come off a diet the right way. They go on a diet, and then when the diet is over, they've lost their weight, they just go back to eating like they used to eat. You shouldn't do it that way. I'm not going to go into how you should do it because that's not what this podcast is about. Just know if you don't know the answer to that question, you should be working with a professional. Um, and then on top of that, just a lot of these diet fads, they don't actually guarantee the results that you might be going for. So you might be like, yeah, I'm going to intermittent fast. This other person intermittent fasted and they lost weight. And then you think, okay, if I intermittent fast, I'll lose weight or whatever. And it might not work for you because the conditions are just different. So just putting that out there for everyone who saw that tweet and who thinks it's a great idea to just all of a sudden jump on the intermittent fasting train and stop eating carbs. That might not go how you think it's going to go. Okay, now for the last shout out that was put on my radar by a friend. And this is one of those situations where sports somewhat intersects with culture. So there's a situation basically where a group of indigenous people are suing the Washington Commanders for going away from the Redskins mascot and logo. And I apologize to anyone who has an issue with me using the word Redskins. It's just, it's used a lot in the discussion about this topic, and it's easier for me to say it than to keep trying to come up with some sort of euphemism. I'm going to try to limit it, but the organization that I'm referring to actually uses the word a lot. So I'm just apologizing in advance. Please don't try to cancel me. I don't think I have a big enough fan base to get canceled. Anyway, so when this was put on my radar, I was just like, okay, who is suing who over what? It was interesting. So I had to look into it and get some details. And I went over to one of my favorite websites. Whenever they do post about issues like this, they're usually very accurate. It's called legalreader.com. Um, and so the headline reads, Controversial Native American Organization Sues Washington Commanders Over Redskins Name Change. It says, in their lawsuit, the Native Americans Guardian Association claims that the Washington Commanders are neglecting indigenous opinions by abandoning their longstanding Redskins name and mascot. And another reason why I'm bringing this up to y'all is because um, if you've been watching this show for a while, then you know we keep up with topics like this anyway. So I'm assuming that you also keep up with topics like this anyway. And so if this does actually become a more popular topic among NFL fans, I just want y'all to have like accurate information about what exactly is happening. So it goes on to say a Native American organization has filed a lawsuit against the Washington Commanders, accusing the football team of conspiring to suppress indigenous history. According to Fox News, the lawsuit was filed on behalf of the Native American Guardian Association, or NAGA. And in their complaint, NAGA attorneys claim that the Commanders and their owner, Josh Harris, are liable for misconduct, including defamation, conspiracy, and assorted civil rights violations. Now, just off those claims alone, I can see why this organization is a little bit controversial, because even if you don't agree with them changing the logo because of what they said about suppressing history, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a second, um, defamation, conspiracy, and civil rights organizations, to me, those things sound a little bit extreme for this particular situation. Earlier this summer, NAGA wrote and hosted a viral petition demanding that the Commanders reclaim the original name, the Redskins, and the petition obtained about 150,000 signatures. Now, what was interesting about that is that I remember hearing about this petition, but when people talked about it, they presented it almost as though it was a bunch of people who just wanted racism to be okay. Like they just wanted the right to still use the term Redskins and they didn't care that it was offensive. But in actuality, it's this group of indigenous people who say that they are trying to make sure that Native American history is preserved through apparently team names like the Redskins. The lawsuit also has this interesting phrase. It says, Commanders, the lawsuit says, is a fitting name for oppressors. So, in other words, what they're saying is like, hey, you had this logo that, according to this organization, was actually designed and approved by tribal leaders, and you replaced it with a name that is like a fitting name for oppressors. So that's just an interesting perspective on this. This particular article goes on to say the Native American Guardians Association also criticized the National Congress of American Indians, accusing it of encouraging the erasure of indigenous identities. The name Redskins carries deep cultural history and emotional significance, honoring the bravery, resilience, and warrior spirit associated with Native American culture, according to the lawsuit. Um, it went on to say, The Redskins had, for instance, used a portrait of the late Blackfoot Chief John Two Guns Whitecalf, and that's the image that they say was approved by tribal leaders. And NAGA says NCAI is on a mission to eradicate Native American history. The more teams that ignorantly bend, the more power NCAI retains. The powerful few do not get to have a monopoly on the narrative. They cannot eradicate Native American history from the hearts and minds of Native Americans. So, of course, I had to look more into these organizations and who they are. So, NAGA, the Native American Guardians Association, is the organization that wants to preserve the Redskins name and logo for Washington Redskins, or Washington Commanders, as they're now called, but they want them to be called the Redskins. And on their website, it says the Native American Guardians Association is a 501c3 nonprofit organization advocating for increased education about Native Americans, especially in public educational institutions. Um, and they have a section on their websites called Misconceptions. And one of the misconceptions they have there says it's a misconception that Redskins or Redmen is racist. So it lists the phrase and it says 90% of Native Americans disagree with that statement. It says Redskin slash Redman is a Native American iconic name and is revered by the vast majority of Native Americans and general public alike. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know enough indigenous people to speak on how accurate that is. So I'm just going with it. I'm just reporting what they're saying. But later on this particular page on their website, it says Redskins was originated by, and then the way their website is set up, there's a picture that covers what it was saying. So it talks about who it was originated by, and then it says the logo was designed and approved by Native American leaders, and the vast majority of both Native Americans and the public revere the name. It's not a term that the white men created, they said. It's actually a term that the Indians themselves created. And see, even the fact that they use the word Indians is weird to me because most indigenous people that I know do not like hearing that particular term. But this is what they're saying. They said it's not a term that the white man created. It's actually a term that the Indians themselves created. I just think we have people in this country that try and gin up problems that don't exist. And this quote was attributed to Chief Robert Two Eagles Green of the Patawomeck tribe. It goes on to say Redskins or red people are the most authentic terms as the Native Americans used a color system to identify others. In the late 1600s and 1700s, the term was first used by Native Americans to self-describe and distinguish themselves from the white man and black man. Redskins was first used as an inclusive expression of solidarity by multiple tribal delegations. So there's a lot on that website. If you go to nagaeducation.org, you can read all about it. The other organization that was mentioned, where is it? The National Congress of American Indians has apparently been around since 1944. And so they feel differently, to say the least. But on their website, it says that they are the oldest, largest, and most representative American Indian and Alaska Native organization serving the broad interests of tribal government and communities. So this was interesting to me for a couple of reasons. And I'm gonna get to the sports related reason last. The first thing that stood out to me about this was that it's interesting because it's a reminder that a lot of these groups of people, a lot of these demographics are not monoliths. A lot of times, whichever group is the first to stand up and say something, a lot of people assume that that must represent everyone who's a part of that group, and it's not always the case. So this situation actually kind of reminded me of the situation that a lot of Black people dealt with whenever it came to changing the Ancient Mama logo and the Uncle Ben logo. So when the discussion of changing those logos first came up, people were like, well, it's offensive. It's a reminder of the past. It's a reminder of slavery, yada, yada, yada. But then there were people who were like, well, those conversations need to happen. Like those things actually happened in American history, and we shouldn't erase things that allow people to pretend like they didn't exist. That was their perspective. It's like if you change these logos and you erase it, it makes it easier for people to pretend like it didn't happen. Whereas if these logos exist and they stand, at least there's like a starting point for certain conversations. At least there are reminders that exist and that are in the real world and face us every day. So whereas a lot of people thought, oh, removing these logos, changing these logos is the respectful thing to do, there were actually a lot of people who were like, no, they should stay. We don't want people to erase that part of the culture or that part of American history. We want all the reminders possible of what was actually going on in this country during a time that a lot of people feel really disconnected from, which is kind of crazy because it's like my great grandfather, that's not a lot of generations ago. My great grandfather was literally born into slavery, um, and he became a sharecropper. And so it's just like if you think about like how close that is in terms of number of generations and just how disconnected from that time period a lot of people feel, like it's really crazy to think about. So yeah, I definitely do understand the perspective of people who are like, no, we don't want to keep erasing reminders. We need to keep them around because what people are trying to do is erase that part of history and pretend like it didn't happen. I see Brother L said something, and I definitely want to hear his opinion. Brother L says, and the funding after changing names allegedly would be redirected. Um, Give me some more details on what you're saying there. Text me if you have to. Um, but yeah, so it's interesting from that perspective. It's also interesting from the perspective of just how things tend to be handled in the world of sports. Because the same thing happens in the world of sports where a lot of times it's assumed that there is one right answer or one way to go about things. For example, kneeling for the anthem was a big thing that put that on display. And I just feel like if we had actually just taken everybody's different stances on it and not attached a race to it or anything, we would have seen so many different perspectives that could have led to so many different conversations on the topic. Because it wasn't just about like, are you kneeling or are you not kneeling? There were some people who wouldn't kneel because they actually do want to ignore issues of police brutality, especially against unarmed black men in the country. There are some people who are against players kneeling because they were really just worried about their bottom line. Only color they cared about was green, and you can judge them for that if you want to, but that's what it is. There were some people who were against kneeling for neither of those reasons. It had to do with their perception of respect for the flag, you know? Then there were some people who respected the flag, but said that you could kneel and still respect the flag. And then there were people who had other opinions besides that. And so it's like when you remove the racial component, you see all these different perspectives that lend themselves to so many different conversations that could be had, you know? Whereas when you just boil it down to, okay, it's white versus black, you end up with these two main perspectives, and everybody thinks that everybody who's black should think this way. And if you don't think that way, then you're self hating or something. Um, and I just feel like in the world of sports, we've gotten so used to just the idea of, and I shouldn't say idea, it's a fact, rich white men being in power. That anytime the league says or a team says, this is what we're going to do, and you hear someone speak out against it, it automatically becomes, oh, we shouldn't support what the team says that they're going to do because it's racist. We shouldn't support what the league says it's going to do because it's racist. And we don't actually stop and listen to all the different perspectives of all the different groups that actually have a say. Um, and so it's interesting, and I'm wondering how issues like this will lend themselves to other race related conversations in the sports world going forward. And by that I mean everything from, you know, there's been talk of like the NBA CBA and the NFL CBA and how race is a component in negotiations for that, to earlier in the summer we talked about the possibility of non-Americans purchasing NFL teams, specifically Saudi Arabians. Um, and I think this is going to be like an interesting conversation to keep going whenever we think about the goings on in the NFL and in the sports world in general, and how it's not just minorities versus white people, and how it's like, no, this sports are a big component of American culture. In a lot of ways, they reflect and mirror American culture. And so when decisions are made, it says something about sports culture and about American culture. And I feel like to try to remove that component from a lot of these conversations, we're just doing ourselves a disservice, because the sports world lends itself to a lot of conversations that we can have. And it allows us all to sit down at a table with a common interest without immediately going at each other's throats, you know? So, Brother L, let's see what he has to say. Hold on. All right. The Uncle Ben Ancient Mama names changing. The original uproar was about the stereotypes and tropes, but then there were stories about where the profits were going once the names changed. Similar to the Washington issue, in other words, more research needs to be done. and more than just my Black friend slash staff member, my Native friend slash staff member, and beyond. Oh, I agree. I agree. Because before this story was put on my radar, I had heard one perspective of how Indigenous people felt about the Redskins name, and I just assumed. And you would think that me knowing my experience as a Black woman and knowing that, hey, women feel different ways about the same topic, Black people feel different ways about the same topic, Black women feel different ways about the same topic. You would think, knowing that and that being my experience, that would have spurred me to look at this situation differently. But it didn't immediately occur to me to think about it that way. I was just like, okay, Indigenous people are offended, they should change it. Boom. Um, so yeah, I think if we allow ourselves to let sports kind of guide the conversation and allow it to act as a medium where we can hopefully more respectfully have this conversation, I think it can lend to a lot of revelations that might help us in the non-sports world. So we'll see how that goes. The sports world itself, like as a whole, is not that respectful of a place. If you've been reading replies to a lot of my tweets lately, you know this. My block button has been busy for the past week. Oh my God. But I've also found some really awesome people like Martin Talk Cowboys, like Brother L, like Voch Lombardi, who are very capable of having respectful, in-depth conversations. So I do appreciate the sports world for introducing me to those people. Um, and yeah, Elle, if you want to talk more about this, like I can have you on one day. I don't know if you were here earlier, but me and Okoye are having a special episode on Tuesday to talk about the whole Shannon Sharp, Brittany Renner body count thing. So like you and I can have a conversation like before. We can be like the opening act to like the main show or something if you want to dive into this. And we can just like make it Culture Tuesdays and not talk about football or the Cowboys or anything and have a good time. Let me know. Um, but we've been here for 37 minutes, so I do want to move on to actually talking about sports. So, well, I say that, but then I'm about to bring up a game that actually it's a team that has a lot of cultural implications in the way that it handles itself and in the way some of its games are conducted. So this weekend, USC versus Colorado is going to happen. And this is a game a lot of people had circled on their calendars. Now, after how Colorado looked against Oregon, I think a lot of people are less excited about it. I think that's part of the reason why it became a morning game, because I don't think it had a set time before. And if it did, it was definitely afternoon or evening. But now that game is going to be 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. That's why I put out that tweet that was like, I wish I had the type of friends who would meet me for brunch to watch this game, because that would be a lot of fun. But I don't have those friends here. But yeah, that game is happening. I already talked a little bit about the preview and what to watch out for over the weekend, but I'm gonna play a clip from CoachPrime earlier today. Now, this is a clip that I have not actually watched in its entirety, so we've reached kind of the watch along portion of the show. So I'm just gonna let it play, and then we'll talk about it. I know some of the things that I'm listening for, but there might also be some other things that stick out. So yeah, this is like hopefully this clip actually plays. Fingers crossed, guys. Help me out. Send all the positive vibes our way because I really do want to talk about this.
It's not with 119, it's with one.
You know, when we were talking about Travis, I should have brought this up. I want people to understand when you preach character to these guys, and we saw just the other night that Travis got together with the young man from CSU, and I thought it was a phenomenal gesture on both players' parts.
Right.
That's a byproduct of what you've been trying to teach us.
Well, character is everything. Character shows up when no one else does.
Yeah.
And Travis is that kind of guy. I mean, it's hard to have a guy at that level and that level character as well. Travis ain't drinking, smoking, staying out late. He's not, trying to impregnate the whole campus. He's just a good kid. Yeah, that happens, okay? Don't think I don't know. Yeah, but Travis is a really good kid. Yeah.
You got we're in the last couple of minutes here. Okay,
yeah.
you
a bunch of little Travises right here. Well, we ain't trying to do.
I was just trying to figure out how do I venture away from that and get into.
I'm sorry, the honesty just leaks out.
That's all right.
Sometimes
those unspoken thoughts just come rolling on out. Hey, so USC coming here. This is I think a marquee quarterback matchup we've got.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams, he's got the Heisman Trophy right now. Give us a quick comment about that young man.
The kid is unbelievable. He extends plays. He has a grasp on his offense. It almost looked like they're just toying with people. They have a tremendous offensive coordinator. He's protected pretty well, but he still has escapability. He keeps his eyes downfield. He doesn't look to run. He looks to throw the ball. They have some guys in the slot. They have some guys on the outside as well, but so they have some guys in the slot that can make it happen.
Yeah.
They're playmakers, and they have a running game that gives them enough balance. When they want to run the football, they can't successfully. So it's going to be a tremendous challenge. I like that because our kids have something to aim at, to shoot at. Like we got to stop this kid.
You know, I think during your playing career, you faced guys like a Randall Cunningham or a Steve Young, guys that had that ability very well.
Yeah, but not like that. I mean, this guy wants to throw.
Sure.
He just has escapability.
So when you've got a guy that's able to do that really puts stress on the defense, right?
True. It does, but you got to, like this morning, we started off with 5 things that offense needs to do. 5 things that the defense need to do that they're going to see from the opposing teams. And that's how we started our morning meeting. And they saw those 5 things candidly that USC is going to do, offensively and defensive, that we got to stop. We got to stop these 5 things.
All right. When we're seeing all kinds of rumors about the famous people coming, well, when do you find out who's going to be at the game? How do you find out about that?
I don't like the phone calls. I get them some, but I send them over to Coach Ray.
Okay.
But
Sorry, I forgot I muted my mic. But yeah, I'm gonna let that keep going in a second, but I want to talk about what he said so far. I guess props to Travis Hunter for not trying to impregnate the whole campus. That was an interesting little tidbit. But yeah, everything that he said about USC, I kind of wish he could have shared with us a couple of things that he thinks that his offense and defense are going to need to do. When I talked about this game, I spoke mostly on the offense of USC. And that's just because they have actually developed into something even better than what they were like last season. So last season, if you paid attention to some of the things that I had to say about USC and about Caleb, I was like, I love Caleb Williams. Let me put out that disclaimer. But from my perspective, he was a 1-read quarterback who like had his 1 read. And if that wasn't there, he just kind of, I don't want to say he panicked, but he just didn't bother with anything else. He trusted his own escapability enough to be like, okay, I looked, it wasn't there. I'm going to just take the ball and do something with it. And that led to some phenomenal highlight reels. It led to some awesome moments for him. But then this season, there are moments where it actually looks like, especially some of the times whenever he double clutches, it looks like he wants to run, but then he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. It looks like he's actually making more of an attempt to do multiple reads, to actually let his skill players do their jobs on the field. And so I think, if I were Coach Prime or Coach Prime staff, one of the things that I would definitely tell the defense is that, hey, do not take your eye off Caleb Williams. Just because it seems like he's not scrambling as much, he's not escaping as much, don't think that he can't do it, because he will do it. You just need to keep your eyes peeled. Their offense is good and it's efficient, but it also can be very unpredictable. Like, we've seen USC go out there and then just, 12 play series, get some runs in, get some short passes in. We've also seen Caleb Williams literally with no pressure to do this. Team has the lead, game is going well. And it's almost like he's got somebody on hold on the sideline. Just literally go out, take the field at the 25, chuck it 75 yards down to the other end zone, score, and then go sit his ass down. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't want to assume, especially based on a situation like, oh, this is what we're going to have to watch for, because he will make you pay for it. Now, the fact that Caleb Williams and his offense have those abilities is what makes me believe that Colorado is going to struggle. I hope they look better than they looked against Oregon, but I simply cannot imagine a world where the Colorado defense, as we've seen it, is able to hold off Caleb Williams and the USC will to win. I just don't see it happening. In several games, it seemed like Shiloh was the main one who was out there making plays and doing something. And the other guys, whether it's because of skill and experience or because of their actual size, because Colorado is a team, they are kind of small, they when it comes to like the more skilled players, and so far from what we've seen from the more skilled teams, they struggle if they don't lose. Like they struggled against for a little while against Nebraska. They definitely struggled against Colorado State and ended up with the win. That game went into overtime. And against Oregon, they got stomped for a lot of reasons, you know? And so I'm just like going over in my mind what would possibly have to happen for them to win this game. And it would literally involve just like Shiloh being Superman. I can definitely understand why, you know, earlier in the week there was a clip that was going around of Travis Hunter texting Coach Prime apparently saying that he absolutely had to play this weekend. And I think the thing for Coach Prime is thinking long term. You know, he's thinking about building this team over time. He's not like a we gotta win this year kind of person. As a matter of fact, he definitely comes off kind of like if you heard Micah Parsons' comments this week, where he said, you know, if you lose, you should learn from it. Like you don't want to lose and not learn. Coach Prime wants his players to learn from this experience, and it also sounds like he's learning from these experiences. Because as a college coach, like yes, he's a good coach. He's a leader of men, absolutely, but he's never been a coach in a conference that has this level of talent. It's just true. Martin says the USC defense will keep Colorado in it. You know, you were here whenever we talked about that Oregon game, and you saw people in the comments saying the same thing about Oregon's defense, and that is not how things went. Um, and I'm gonna tell you why it will take some egregious missteps on the part of USC's defense for them to keep Colorado in it because Colorado's offensive line looks like they hate Shedeursanders. They play like they want that man to fail and get hurt doing it. Like, dude had no help. He had no help and no hope. Like, I'm sorry. They haven't been doing anything for him. So unless they did some miraculous work this week, I just don't see how they can hold up to any defense worth their salt. Any defense of a team that's been able to win the way USC's been winning, they have what it takes to beat Colorado's O line. Martin says it's still we coming. I don't know where they going. not this week. I don't know. And I feel bad for Shedeur because I do think that he has what it takes to be a good quarterback. Um, Brother L said no help and no hope is insane. It's true. And I mean that literally. Like, think about it. Hold on, I'm gonna put this back up here. So he had no help in the sense that they were doing nothing in terms of giving him time to like make reads or find a target or anything. So he had no help with that. His O line was just like, sorry, boss, we can't do it. And then even when he tried other things, he was like, well, I'm a scramble. They had 2 spies on him. So they didn't even have to send enough people to where they couldn't send 2 spies. They were sending 4, maybe 5, but most of the time they were sending 4 and still getting to him in like less than 2 seconds. And they had 2 spies. It was just like there were no options. He tried to turn to the quick game. Like, okay, I hand it off quick. I'm gonna try to like do short passes. And they were like, nope, we're gonna stuff that too. Like, you're done. No hope for you. So yeah, Shedeur is having a bad time. And so when Coach Prime went on, I forget what show it was, but he went on a show and he said, we need about 8 more dogs before we can actually make an impact on college football. My mind immediately went to offensive and defensive line. That's your 8. That's what you need. Because his son needs help. His son needs help. Um, he said, I didn't know Colorado had the chat playing O-line. Pretty much. Pretty much. So we'll see what happens, but it's just like USC would have to literally like not try to keep Colorado in this game. Or maybe Shedeur will actually show up and be Superman. Maybe he'll figure something out to where he can actually put the game in his own hands and get it done. I don't know. I just know watching that Oregon game, I felt bad for him. But it kind of sheds light on what Coach Prime has been saying about him taking time, building the program, and why he's been so big on recruiting. A lot of people have been very critical of his recruiting efforts, which includes having celebrities come and endorse the team, because he said himself that he knows like these young kids, like they want the attention, they want the flashy stuff, they want the endorsements. And so he's basically trying to create an environment to where even if the team isn't the best team, even if they're losing, they have a culture and they have a certain status that will attract really good players. And it sounds like what he's hoping is that those really good players will continuously elevate the program until they can actually get some of the best recruits in the country, and get them off their merit. So, like I always say, I'm here for it. And uh, Brother L said, I'm bigger than 3/4 of Colorado. If you've never met Brother L, like, yeah, real talk, this actually might be like legit and not hyperbole. I do think Brother L is literally bigger than 3/4 of Colorado. Like, they definitely need, like how Voch talks about the off-season peanut butter. They need peanut butter, they need protein, they need steaks, they need a good lifting program. um, so yeah, but speaking of creating that environment, I do want to listen to a little bit more of this clip, and then we'll get into Cowboys. I just want to hear what he says about the celebrities showing up at the games.
It's probably 3 times what you guys have heard. It's probably 3 or 4 times that. And some guys you may not deem to be famous, but your kids do.
Sure,
you know?
sure, we understand.
Yeah. And also we have some former buffs that's here that I love when the former players come back.
Oh, yeah.
Like I just left Cordell and Westbrook over. They over there eating right now, and I can't wait to get back to chop it up with them. But it's going to be good. But I like that for you all. I mean, I really do. I like that some of these guys are, parking the big jets on the nearest airport, and you're going to see, shoot, I think half the NBA is going to be here. Yeah.
Okay. I know there are plenty of former players that'll talk football with you. Who's a famous person that gives you football advice? Is there somebody?
A famous person that gives me football advice?
I mean, outside of a Warren Sapp and guys that know the ball.
Famous? You mean like an actor or?
Sure.
No one gives me football advice.
Like, Prime, you really should try and maybe do that.
All right, we can stop there. If y'all want to see more of that, you can go to Buffs TV on YouTube. They post original clips like this one, and they also tend to curate a lot of Buffaloes related posts. So if you like seeing Buffaloes content, go to Buffs TV on YouTube and check that out. But y'all are hilarious. They need potions. Yeah, they need potions. We'll call it potions. They need something. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that a lot of people are apparently still interested in showing up for those games. I think it's going to be a good atmosphere and a good time. I'm going to be having brunch by myself, apparently. So yeah, tomorrow morning, mimosas on deck. I will be watching Colorado versus USC and tweeting about it. So if my tweets go a little bit left, just know the mimosas are hitting and I'm having a good time. Just, you see me tweet something like, dang, Jazz is on one. Just be like, yeah, she's enjoying herself this morning. And also, yeah, I'm excited about not having a late game. So like for the past 2 Saturdays in a row, I literally did not sleep on Saturday night. And it was because like I'd watch the game and then I'd stay up to try to watch post game. And then I have this one particular friend who also likes to stay up and watch post game. And we would literally get on the phone and just be talking about Buffaloes and Cowboys. And the next thing you know, literally the sun is coming up. I literally one time talked to them and then like the sun was coming up. And I was like, oh shit, I have not slept. And now I have to do this show that I promised people I would do the day after the Colorado game. And so it was like, watch Colorado, talk on the phone for hours all night, do a show, and then take a nap before the Cowboys game. And I need to stop doing that. That is not healthy. I have really bad sleeping habits. So yeah. Anyway, that brings us to the part of the show that a lot of people are here for. I have an insane number of Cowboys fans, considering the Cowboys fans in my audience, considering how this podcast started. But I love you guys. You guys have made hosting this podcast fun. There are some frustrating people in Cowboys Nation, but there are also some really awesome people in Cowboys Nation. But yeah, talking about the Cowboys, before I get into it, into the game against the Patriots that's coming up, I do want to put a bow on a few things. So this isn't me trying to bring up the Cardinals game again. We're not going to dissect it or analyze it. But there were a couple of things that when I talked about it Monday morning, I didn't really go into because I wasn't sure how the conversation was going to go this week. But now that a few things have come out, I just want to like put a bow on a few things and clarify some things about how I feel and what I think is true, particularly when it comes to blaming Dak Prescott. Now, I put out a tweet earlier where I was, once again, obligatory RyanClark shout out. I posted a clip of some things that RyanClark said, along with some things that Stephen A. Smith said, and Bart Scott, about Dak Prescott's responsibility in elevating this team. And if RyanClark were actually on the screen right now, there might be somewhat of a debate about it, because although I do think he was respectful in his comments, I don't think they were necessarily 100% accurate on every point, but they were accurate enough for me to feel comfortable sharing. What I will say is this: I do want to see more from Dak Prescott, but the reason why I'm not blaming him for the Cardinals' loss or saying that he's the weak link of the team or jumping to the conclusion a lot of people are jumping to that, he should be replaced is because I just feel like there were too many things going on in that game to put it all on him. Like, I'm disappointed in his performance based on what I saw from him, but I'm not disappointed in the sense that, like, the team would have won had you fixed these things. So, for example, um, I've seen some people say, Stephen A. Smith said this, that Dak Prescott lost to Josh Dobbs. He did not. There was not a single time where Dak Prescott and Josh Dobbs were on the field at the same time. The Dallas Cowboys defense failed against Josh Dobbs and the Cardinals offense. There's nothing that Dak Prescott could have done about that, except maybe from a leadership perspective. And even in that sense, I don't know what you can really do the day of. I don't know enough about the culture and the routines of the team to be like, oh yeah, he should have done something to help them get their head in the games. Like, no, it's like, and then especially considering we don't attribute the defense's success to Dak Prescott. So I sure is fucking not gonna sit here and be like, well, they weren't performing well, so Dak Prescott should have done something. Like, in generally the narrative is that Dak Prescott is a good leader. So, props to him for being that. It sounds like the locker room respects him. So when it comes to the ways that the Cowboys defense failed, I'm putting that on the defense, period. And so then whenever you look at that, you have to say, like, okay, the Cowboys defense allowed the Cardinals to score 9 points in less than 9 minutes. Think about that for a second. So it's just like from jump, they were the Cowboys offense was put in a situation where, they had to be really careful about how the offense was executed. And then you think about Mike McCarthy's comments, what he said about him possibly overreacting to the O-line injuries. And the injuries led to one Chuma Edoga being put at left tackle, which if you actually watch what's happening, and I have to say this about ESPN real quick, sidebar. If I had to take my gripes with networks like ESPN and actually start attributing like tangible issues to them, not just the general like, oh, I don't like the narrative that they perpetuate, they always hate Dak, yada yada yada. If I had to start assigning like tangible issues to the things that I don't like, one of the issues that I have is the fact that they never talk about offensive line issues. Like, even outside the Cowboys, today they were on Get Up and First Take, they were talking about the Packers versus Lions game that happened last night. And they talked about Jordan Love and the issues that he was having at quarterback, but they did not talk about how the offensive line was affecting him. And I'm just like, to me, watching that game, that was a big part of some of the failures that we saw on the part of Jordan Love. He got sacked, he got hit, he got pressured. It looked like his timing was off. It looked like he was rushing himself to avoid getting sacked, hit, and pressured. And you could just see that there were times that assignments were missed, dudes were getting run over, dudes were getting backed into him. And then the same thing also happens with Dak Prescott. It's like, if you actually watch the film, you see moments where you might be like, if you're only watching for where the ball goes, you might be like, how did he miss that throw? Why did it go over there? If you actually watch the film, you see like, oh, his hand got hit, or oh, this person was coming, he had to get rid of it quickly, yada yada yada. And so one thing I would say to people who want to watch film or who do watch film, and I know for me trying to watch film, like one of the biggest questions I kept asking people was like, how do you watch film? In other words, for me, there's a lot of shit going on the screen, right? Usually if I'm watching film, it's roller derby and there's up to 10 people on the track at a time. Football, you've got 11 people all spread out, all doing different shit. It can be a little bit overwhelming. But for me, what I have personally found to be helpful is to start with the O-line, because what happens on the O-line, even before the snap, seems to give a lot of context to everything that happens as a play is executed. And so for me, watching ESPN is just really frustrating that they never add that context to these conversations. Brother L said, when Jeff Saturday was more of a regular, ESPN, I like the fact that you bleeped them out. That's cute. ESPN did more with O-line talk, him trying out coaching and failing probably through that conversation piece off. You might be right because a lot of times when people are not successful at a thing, people don't want to hear anything more about that from them. Um, which is weird because I'm like, you, as much as I make fun of Dan Orlovsky, you don't have to be good at doing something to talk about what you see when you watch other people do it. I've noticed that in talking about all sports, including derby. Sometimes I have feedback or comments on people who are much better skaters than me. Um, and yeah, Martin agreed. It does start up front. Even I'm thinking of like one particular play that we saw in Vach's Patreon where before the snap even happened, we saw Chuma kind of lean over to Tyler Smith as though he was asking, like, who am I supposed to be blocking? Like, what's my assignment? Like, he didn't know. And so it's like you go back to training camp where we saw Chuma like not perform well, which is why a lot of people were surprised that he was at left tackle in the first place. And then you add into that the additional context that, okay, not only does he seem physically incapable of performing at this role, but now we're seeing that like cognitively he might also have issues. Then you start to understand like, yeah, it makes sense that Dak Prescott might have been nervous as fuck. Like, so I just want to really quickly play this clip from Mike McCarthy's press conference from Monday. This is a clip that was going around a lot on Cowboys Twitter. A lot of people are shouting out Aisha Morrison for asking a really excellent question. But in Mike McCarthy's answer, he talks a little bit about his overreaction to the O-line injuries. And I'm playing it just because it seems like there are a lot of people who miss this part of the conversation. So as I continue discussing the Cowboys, I want to make sure we're all on the same page about what Mike McCarthy said and what that could potentially mean. Because I'm just seeing some comments where it's almost like, I don't know, just people just seem to be missing this piece. So as we continue this conversation, I just want to make sure that we all remember what he said and add that context to this conversation.
Aisha Morrison, DallasCowboys.com. Coach, the West Coast system is very methodical. How you move down the field. You just mentioned just how much you guys are getting to the red zone. The vertical threat is important to, hitting those big plays when those plays are there is important. Is that something that you gentlemen are still working on, trying to establish that the vertical threat of this West Coast offense right now?
Well, the vertical gang, great question. Appreciate your insight. Is the vertical game. Frankly, you got to look at how they played too. So that when they had a cap on it, they're early. There wasn't a lot of 7 steps. I think we took one 7-step drop, and that was by design. And that might have been maybe a slight overreaction from me. Based off of having the 3 new starters up front. So and that's part of the game. And it's part of calling a game. On where where's the stress points and making sure those guys get going. I mean, just you go back to the first series. I mean, that's first time we didn't move the ball in the first series of the game, and it's a great credit to our crowd. I mean, because to be honest, it created such a great environment. I think they made the Cardinal fans a little louder. I mean, we had to go to so we didn't think with so many Cowboy fans at the stadium, we didn't go silent count the first series. So but we're in it the second series because I mean that was a loud atmosphere, and that's a credit to all the great Cowboy fans there. But the Cardinal fans kind of they stepped up too. So I think it made for a great atmosphere to compete in. So it's always little things usually when it comes down to those type of mistakes.
Okay, so there were a couple of things that he said in there, right? So for one thing, one of the first things that he mentioned is that he might have overreacted. Martin said Aisha bamboozled him. I don't think she necessarily bamboozled him. I think he wasn't expecting to get so insightful of a question, and so he might not have prepared an answer. I was just like, okay, how do I answer this respectfully? So yeah, he talked about overreacting and he talked about stress points. And so even though, one of the things that's come up in conversation, especially today, is doesn't Dak Prescott have full control of the offense? Because that's what we were told over the summer, was that he would have full control over the offense. He would have ability to make changes at the line of scrimmage, so on and so forth. But one thing I thought about is like, well, what if part of McCarthy's overreaction was to go to Dak and be like, hey, because of the O-line issues, we're going to have to change some things in the playbook. I don't want you to accidentally call something that's not a good fit for the people that we have out here. just let's go with what I call today. Let's try to keep control over the situation and not go too far, you know? So we don't know what kind of authority may have been taken from Dak Prescott, especially considering what we've seen from Dak in situations where it does seem like he does have control. And we think about how Dak called the game where Will Greer was quarterbacking, you know? Um, it's it didn't seem like if Dak Prescott had to make those adjustments himself, just what we saw from that offense didn't seem like what you would expect if you expect Dak to be in charge of the play calling. So I'm like, I don't know for sure what happened there, but the fact that I don't know is enough for me to not be too critical of that. And that's why everything I'm saying, I'm just like, okay, moving forward, I want to see more from Dak Prescott because, like, okay, some unexpected things happened in that Cardinals game. But moving forward, I feel like if we actually do expect Dak Prescott to take full control of the offense and for him to have experience doing that, especially in stressful situations like what they were under in Arizona, like what they might face against more challenging teams, like what they might face in the playoffs, he's going to need to be able to take control of that offense in stressful situations, in situations where your personnel might change all of a sudden. Because, like, yes, these injuries came down last minute, but what happens when they happen during the game? You know, I need to know that Dak Prescott is capable of handling that and handling that well. um so that was one of the things, you know, obviously the O-line injuries themselves, Dak couldn't do anything about. So I'm just like, yes, I do want to see Dak step up. I do think it's impossible to change the narrative about Dak Prescott and what he's capable of with this team until he does step up. Um, but I'm not at a point where I'm just like, oh yeah, that loss was his fault. I'm not ready to completely write him off as a quarterback and as a leader. Nothing like that. So everything that I say is about what I want to see from him moving forward and what I think would be good in terms of his role on the team moving forward. Now, that being said, is there a new injury report out, by the way? I don't know. Somebody let me know. Somebody go check Patrick Nosey Walker's Twitter and let me know if something new came out. Because as far as I know, Tyron Smith is still expected to not play on Sunday, but Biotish and Martin seem to be like, rumor has it that they'll be back. So so let me know. Martin says he's working with IDing LBs. It was worlds difference from game one. Brother L says there is. So okay, I'm gonna do like how we used to do on this show and just check Twitter while I'm talking to y'all. No big deal. We used to do this all the time back when like literally nobody watched our live streams. So it's whatever. Okay, 2 hours ago, Patrick Nosey Walker said this. He said, Cowboys injury report Friday versus Patriots. Tyron Smith is ruled out. Tyler Biotish and Zach Martin are both questionable, but they have made progress. Peyton Hendershot is questionable with an ankle injury, and Chuma Edoga is fully cleared to go. Hopefully not at left tackle. That We've never seen him do well at left tackle, dude. I would rather see Awesome Richards start at left tackle, and if somehow that's worse, we can put Chima in or try something else. But I don't think we need to revisit that experiment. We've seen enough. We don't need to do that again. So yeah. Martin said, or check the chat. Sorry, there's a delay. The timing is not on, but thank you, Martin. I appreciate you. So if anybody missed anything that I just said, just scroll up and see what Martin had to say. Martin has the injury report in the chat. Awesome. Much appreciated. So yeah, I also hear that Chuma is still nursing an elbow injury. So people keep bringing that up when they talk about his performance at left tackle. I don't know what that actually has to do. Like, I don't know what kind of elbow injury it is, but just like, whatever. To me, that's even more reason to put Awesome in there. Like, if Chuma's hurt, sit his ass down, let somebody else try. We don't need to see that again. So, as far as moving on to the Patriots, there's a lot of different angles you could look at this game. I'm not big on matchups. If you know me, like especially like at the end of the week, I'm just like, okay. Like, y'all have heard all the different possible matchups from everybody. But I will say this. Yesterday, I was in a Twitter space. And a lot of times whenever you're in Twitter spaces, especially if you are known for being active and talking a lot in said space. They'll ask a question and you got to come up with an answer. That's how I got into doing predictions. I don't like doing predictions, but I'm in this one particular space that Nick's hosts, Nick's of Pick Six Sports. And it just kind of got to the point where I just kind of felt like a dick for like never offering a prediction, because I'm like in there and I talk all the time. I always have a mic and they'll be like, yeah, what's your prediction? I'm like, I'm not doing a prediction. So I'm just like, nah, I'm gonna do predictions. And yesterday I offered a matchup, and the matchup that I said I'm gonna be personally looking for is Bill Belichick versus Dak Prescott. And that was that particular matchup was partially inspired by a question that was brought up on Vach Lombardi's show. So I'm gonna let y'all see this clip from Vach's show, and then we'll talk about it, because that's the most interesting part to me at this point.
And if y'all want to have a good laugh at the Eagles, you know, Jalen Hurts was uncomfortable for a long time. If y'all want to have a good laugh, go watch Eagles versus Bill. Now the Eagles eventually won because the Patriots ain't got enough dudes to deal with that. But scheme wise, quarterback got real uncomfortable. Now Dak ain't Jalen Hurts. Will still they two different quarterbacks. They win in two totally different ways. You think Bill has a scheme that can make Dak like that uncomfortable? Of course, some level of uncomfortable, right? Some level of discomfort, but as uncomfortable as Jalen Hurts was, because I feel like Jalen Hurts kind of had this, he has this whole thing around him. And me and you, we ain't talking about the Eagles right now. But if Jalen has a bad game, they can work themselves out of that, right? Do you think that Belichick can make Dak as uncomfortable as he made Jalen in
I don't know how. I don't know what.
Sorry, Will. If you want to hear what Will still had to say, definitely go check out that clip. But Vach is right. The Eagles did win that game, but Jalen Hurts did look uncomfortable during several moments in that game. As a matter of fact, if it weren't for this play where everybody puts their hands on Jalen Hurts' ass and pushes him, a couple of yards ahead of them, who knows what would have actually happened. Martin said lots of uncomfortable in this segment. So yeah, Vach was also right about the fact that Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott are two whole different quarterbacks. But if you remove that component from the question and just think about, does Bill Belichick have the capacity to make Dak Prescott uncomfortable, or is that something that he might try to do? My evaluation on that is I do think that it's something that Bill Belichick is going to try to do, but I think he is smart enough to go about it in a different way. So I say that because if you watch Dak Prescott regularly, you can kind of tell that there's not a lot outside of actual contact that makes him uncomfortable. And even then, it doesn't look so much like discomfort as he just has to respond. Like if a dude is coming for him, he's going to try to get away. If he does get hit, it'll throw off the path of the ball. But he doesn't usually look rattled, unless the situations where he does look rattled is when the people around him are fucking up. And that's what I think might happen. So obviously, if there's still issues on the O-line, I think there are going to be some special ways that they try to attack that. Some ways that they try to maybe confuse. If Hoffman ends up at center, they probably try to confuse him. If not, I don't think that would be as reliable of a strategy. But I do think that what we've seen from the Jets, even though the Cowboys did beat the Jets, and also from the Cardinals, was basically trying to figure out how to microwave methods of throwing off offense by making other people on the offense uncomfortable, and thereby making Dak have to second guess or adjust on the fly. That's really the only way that you can throw Dak off his game. Because if you think about it, that's why he's so good against the blitz. Because you can throw a bunch of people at him, and as long as he can identify a target, he can get the ball out. He'll figure that part out. So it's like, throw what you want at him, fine. As if they don't actually get to him, he'll figure it out. He'll find a window to fit that ball into. And I also think that's why when Kellen Moore was here, Kellen Moore in his inexperience, that's probably why he thought that it was so appropriate to throw out a lot of curl routes and comeback routes and option routes, because those are all things that are designed to create space, to create targets for the quarterback to throw the ball to. And so it's like, if in your limited experience, your limited knowledge as a young OC, you're just like, hey, if my quarterback has a target that he feels like he can get the ball to, he'll get it there. So I'm gonna just draw up routes to where he always has a target. Easy, you know? And it's like if you think about it, if you like kind of mute the disappointments a little bit, two 12-win seasons in a row, you know, getting to the second round of the playoffs. So you get to a round that only 7 other teams get to in the playoffs. In the grand scheme of things, if you think about in comparison to 32 other teams, or not 32 other teams, 31 other teams in the NFL, they actually did well. Like the Cowboys have actually been one of the top performing teams offensively for the past couple seasons. So it's not like that strategy was totally wrong. For the most part, for the most part, it works. You make it possible for Dak to see a target, he'll get the ball there. Cowboys will win the game, they'll get points most of the time. The issues came that there were certain situations where it wasn't, that strategy didn't really work, and also it became very predictable. It was the lack of creativity that became an issue. How many defenders from opposing teams did we hear say, oh, we knew what they were going to do? Even me watching that last playoff game against the 49ers, even me watching, I could tell that they just kind of knew where the ball was going to go. Like they were predicting it. It was so easy for them to jump the path of the ball and take it away. It was crazy. And so that was the issue, you know? And so then I think what we're seeing this season is people are figuring that out. And they're also figuring it out like, hey, instead of wasting a lot of energy doing that all over the field, we'll just wait to get to the red zone and then start to employ these tactics. So for me watching the Cardinals, and if you disagree, feel free to put it in the chat. I always say, if you think I'm wrong, tell me where I'm wrong. But what it looks like is like when they're between the 20s, it looks like the Cowboys have a really easy time moving because they're doing a lot of things at different levels. So there are a lot of different areas of the field that somebody could run to, or Dak could throw the ball to, or Dak himself could scramble to, so on and so forth, right? And so it's easier to move. But then whenever that space gets condensed, it almost looks like, especially with the Cardinals, it almost looked like they would wait for Dak to turn his head, and whichever direction he looked, everybody ran that way. And it was just like, we are just going to flood his field of vision. And if we can make it harder for him to find a target and make him a little bit slower on getting the ball out, make him second guess, should I scramble, should I hand it off, whatever, we can kind of throw him off his game a little bit. So once again, not by directly affecting him, but by affecting the people around him and making them perhaps do things that aren't the smartest in the situation. The corners were sitting on the routes. Cool. Also some input from Martin. Martin says the corners are you talking about the Cardinals game? I don't always look at these comments immediately as they're left. So like if you could add context to your statements, that would be very helpful. They get restricted in smaller spaces. 100%. Absolutely, they get restricted in smaller spaces. And I think it's just sometimes it's harder to figure out creative ways to navigate that, basically. So that's what I think is going to happen. The 49. Oh, yeah. With the 49ers, 100% the corners were sitting on the routes. It's like it was easy work for them. It was easy work for them. And not because our players aren't talented. It was because everything that was put out on the field was so predictable. They could just kind of wait. Because if you think about it, even with option routes, like option routes are made to be somewhat unpredictable. Like the whole point in option routes is to make it so that like whatever the defender does ends up being wrong. But like players have tendencies. So it's like if you have people run a bunch of option routes all through the season, and then you get to the end of the season or the postseason, and you're able to watch film of what these particular receivers did all season, you can start to see the tendencies and you can start to predict them. And so you might not be right 100% of the time, but you can start to kind of get a feel for like, okay, if he does this, then he's probably about to do this. If he does that, he's probably about to do that, right? And then another big thing about option routes is like they don't work as well if the quarterback and receiver don't see the same thing when they look at the field. So in other words, everything that they've been saying about being on the same page is really, really important. And when CeeDee Lamb says, okay, last season we were never on the same page, for me, that tells me all I need to know. However, has it been long enough into this season for them to break some of the bad habits that they might have? Maybe not. And I think what's happening is that teams are taking advantage of some of those lingering bad habits. They're taking advantage of, the way that Dak looks at the field and how he tries to find his targets. And they're just trying to make that harder. And And so, yeah, I think they are just going to try to mess up the receivers. They're going to try to mess up the O line. And if they can do that, they'll probably feel pretty confident in their ability to mess up Dak Prescott. It says Dak has to throw before the receivers break on their routes. Cool. That's just a fact. I don't I don't have anything to say to that. So yeah, I think if Dak is able to maintain the type of command over the offense to where even with as Mike McCarthy keeps saying, unscouted looks, even in the face of unscouted looks, he's able to still like keep control over the offense, keep everybody on the same page, and make sure that people are doing what they need him to do in order for him to find them. I think everything is going to be okay, because I do think some unscouted looks are definitely a tool that Bill Belichick is going to use, because when it comes to like, okay, how can I confuse this guy? How can I make him take a tick longer to get the ball out? How can I perhaps confuse some of the other people that are on the field with him? Yeah, unscouted looks is an easy way to do that. And I think this early in the season, he probably does have some things that he can put on the field that, might throw off the offense a little bit. So that's not impossible. Also, Dak talked in one of his press conferences about using his feet more. I think that's going to be essential, because I think a lot of people saw opportunities during the Cardinals games that they felt like he probably could have scrambled, and he did have a couple of scrambles. It's not like he didn't do it at all, but you kind of feel like he could do it more. People who are considered elite quarterbacks, which these days that list pretty much begins and ends with Patrick Mahomes. They're able to do stuff on the fly, like during the last game, there was this sound bite that was released, almost like a mini sound from the sidelines, that a lot of the news outlets were putting out about the Chiefs, and a conversation that happened between Mahomes and, was it Kelsey? I think it was Kelsey. Yeah, it was Kelsey, because they said that he did this thing to impress Taylor Swift. But yeah, basically, Kelsey just made up a route. He just made up a route. He went out there and did something that they hadn't planned, but he did it. And Patrick Mahomes just found him and got him the ball. Now they didn't do that the whole damn game, but in that instance, to get into the end zone, that's what they did, and it worked. And I don't think that that's something that Dak Prescott isn't capable of. It's just something that we don't see for whatever reason. And so I think whenever we talk about Dak taking the game into his own hands, we're talking about not only taking command of the offense and getting the offense on the same page and getting them to do what they need to do, regardless of what they see out on the field. I think sometimes people do want to see him like scramble, get the 6 points himself, or just figure out how to find a target in the midst of a broken play. So we'll see how it goes, but that's pretty much all I have on that game. It's another one that I don't expect the Cowboys to lose, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit nervous about what's happening with the O line still, because it's not confirmed who's going to be on it. Like, yes, Biotis and Martin are improving, but they're still questionable. And we don't know what happened at practice this week. We don't know where Chuma is going to line up. And I do think all of those things are going to have a big impact on what our offense looks like and how well they can perform, and what weaknesses there are to deal with. Um, Brother L said, who is Dak's security blanket at receiver? You know what? That's a good question. And that could be another issue. I think a lot of people would assume that it's CeeDee Lamb, but CeeDee Lamb isn't getting targets in the red zone for some reason. The fact that we can't watch 3 games of Dak Prescott on the field and know that offhand, to me, says he doesn't have one yet, which is not great. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I know CeeDee Lamb in his sound said something to the effect of like, get me the rock and I'll get it in the end zone. And I kind of made a joke about that with Jesse Holly, but I do think CeeDee is right. I do think he especially considering all the work that he put in during the offseason. I do think that now I say that, but then I'm thinking of moments in my head where he like got the ball in the flat and just didn't really go very far. So to answer your question, Brother L, I don't know. But I think it should be CeeDee Lamb. And hopefully that's something that they worked on in practice to ensure that happens. Martin, are you laughing at me struggling to answer this question and like get through it without like accidentally offending my favorite players? Because if you are, that's rude. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out this Sunday. Martin said TBD. Yes, TBD indeed. But yeah, that's all I got. I'll give y'all a couple of seconds to ask more questions if you have any. I'm happy to answer them. Martin said, I'm struggling now too. Yeah, we all are. Like, shoot, maybe Aisha could ask that question this week. Somebody text Aisha and be like, yo, burning questions for the team. We need to know who is Dak's security blanket at receiver because it does seem like every team has one, right? Like I think for a lot of people would consider Travis Kelce to be that for Patrick Mahomes. Like even the first week of the season when they were facing the Lions, and it was learned that Travis Kelce was going to be out. There were a lot of people who were like, "Oh, well, who's going to be the favorite target of Patrick Mahomes?" And I think a lot of people were just kind of like, "Well, it doesn't really matter. It's the Lions." And the Lions were like, "Fuck you guys." We're gonna show you who the fuck we are this season, and we're gonna give you a reason to stop disrespecting us. And but yeah, even Patrick Mahomes has a favorite. The only teams that I can think of where the quarterback doesn't have a like a security blanket receiver or a favorite target are teams that quite frankly seem to be struggling offensively. So maybe that's something that really needs to be sorted out more than a lot of us realize. Um, Brother L said, LOL, that's the point though. Dak is so good at getting random people the ball, but he doesn't have a specific go-to guy to have the kind of communication Mahomes and Kelsey, Brady and Gronk, Burrow and Chase, etc. That is an excellent point, and I think it's one that doesn't get enough attention. Um, I think sometimes we just think about those quarterback receiver pairings as just being two very talented people, and it's like, oh, of course they're going to connect. Like that quarterback is really good, that receiver is really good. We don't think about the ways in which they make each other good, right? And so that I'm surprised I never thought about this, but that is definitely something that could be missing from the offense because and this is a completely different sport. I know. Like people love to come in my replies and be like, roller derby is a different sport than football. I know, but it's a comparison. But I'm thinking about in roller derby, there's a situation where you might need offense. So on the track, you're playing offense. Shut up. We don't need to know about that right now. But on the track, you might be playing offense and defense at the same time. So if both jammers are in the pack, then you're going to be playing defense trying to stop the opposing jammer from going through. But you might need one person to come through and play offense to help your jammer get out against the opposing blockers who are playing defense on them. And so a lot of times you'll notice that a jammer will have like a favorite offense player because they know that person's habits, they know how they move, and the communication becomes so strong between them over the course of the season. It's like that's the person that they can go to because the connection ends up like damn near telepathic to where they don't have to talk as much. There's not as much like verbal communication. And it's almost like they can move faster together just because they know each other that well. Their movements are predictable to one another. So when I think about having this relationship between a quarterback and their favorite target or their security blanket receiver, as you put it, Brother L, I do see how that could be valuable to where when you're in that situation and something goes wrong and maybe that receiver has to make up a route like Kelsey did, you're still able to find them because you are just so used to looking for them, or they know how to get your attention, or y'all's nonverbal communication is that great to where you're just on the same page without even trying. So that's a really good call out and something I'll definitely be looking for moving forward. Anything else? I'm gonna be posting some fun clips tomorrow, you guys. I somehow ended up on down this like rabbit hole of old school DeionSanders clips. I found this one clip that I think is like a really good reminder of just who DeionSanders was in his youth, and just this whole thing of him like fraternizing with celebrities and just enjoying the spotlight and enjoying being flashy is not new. Like this is something like he knows that world. It's not something that he's like pretending to be for the sake of getting recruits. It's something that he's always been attracted to and always been able to use to his advantage. So I'm going to be sharing a clip of that and some other old school clips. Shout out ADHD. Sometimes it makes it hard to prepare for a live stream like this one. But other times it sends you down a rabbit hole. And so you find these great clips and all this great content to share with the people who follow you on Twitter, which has now reached over 5,100. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you for following. Said it's a weird thing. Number one wide receiver does not equal go to. That is weird, brother L. And L said, pass my question to 2I or Pat No C. I'll see what I can do about that. You can always tag them on Twitter and see what happens. That actually sounds like the type of question that No C might answer. So yeah. But on that note, we've been here for over an hour and a half. Thank you to all the subscribers. We're now over 500 subscribers. Much appreciated. We're also now over 5,100 Twitter followers. Much appreciated. I don't know where this journey is going to go this season, but I am so glad to have so much support from a lot of people in a lot of different places. I know I shout out RyanClark every week, but if I had the time to shout out all the new followers and all the new subscribers, I would as well, because honestly, seeing those numbers go up, they're a reminder that people actually do like what I'm doing. They do like the content. Y'all do like the conversations that we have. So thank you for your continued support. Just a reminder, I'll be on Twitter Saturday. Okay, we're back. I think we're back. So just a reminder, I'll be on Twitter Saturday tweeting about the Colorado game. So if you're up watching that, join me on Twitter. On Sunday morning, I'll talk about the recap of the Colorado game and anything else interesting that happened in college football. And I'll probably talk one more time about the Cowboys game. And then on Monday, I'll do like my Monday morning reaction to the Cowboys game. And as always, I'm going to be tweeting during the Cowboys game. So hope to see y'all all there. But on that note, thanks everybody in the chat for participating. I'm Bitch2, and I'm out.